Finally getting his turn with the Tuneup Treatment, it's my sweet autumn-colored beetle boy from Medarot 5. It is KBT0C Chrotojil, regraded, with a kit of missile, rifle, Gatling, biped legs, and the leg ability of Premacy, which passively reduces incoming damage by up to 20% if taking damage from a target with the same leg type. Now when it comes to overall balance as a conventional shooter, you really can't go wrong with anyone from the KBT family. That can be either Metabee, Bayonet, Saikachis, Beetle D, and Chrotojil is absolutely no exception to this rule. Missile is a gunpowder-based skill and a staple more or less to the KBT series. That is a full AoE, meaning it will damage all active parts of the target when attacking and spread the damage evenly across them. If 4 parts are active, that's a quarter damage to each. When 2 parts are active, that's 50-50, and so on and so forth. Rifle is a conventional and very basic shooting skill you can never ever go wrong with using anywhere for its incredible balance and versatility. No major drawbacks, no major disadvantages, no defend or no dodge. It's a skill that is always openly welcomed on any team needing an auxiliary shooter type. Gatling, also for this very same reason, is another very well-known and well-used conventional shooting skill that is instead a scattered AoE, meaning it will damage 1 part normally and then 2 others at random at 1/3 your damage. And normally, scattered AoE skills like Gatling will more often than not have a higher success rate, which usually will capitalize on a higher chance of critical hits, despite spreading the damage across them. Now, compared to most other KBTs that tend to focus on, say, balance or even damage in some cases, Chrotojil instead chooses to focus on extended survivability and defense, whereas even if his base damage is not as high, and honestly the numbers as say compared to Metabee can be very nominal and negligible in some cases, it's honestly where the leg ability is where Chrotojil really shines, given that since about 75 or even 80 or more % of all Medarots in the existence of the franchise are primarily bipedal based, that means across the board Chrotojil is going to have that passive damage reduction, further guaranteeing that he can work on his own very efficiently without anyone very quickly crippling him. And because of his incredible balance, he honestly is someone you can very easily and very reliably depend on as someone you can kind of leave alone to do his own thing without really having to babysit him, because he's already going to be knowing what he has to do with his role as a balanced and conventional auxiliary shooter type. Now with his tune-up treatment, he basically kind of chosen to take what he already had under the hood and kind of bolster some of his lesser skills in some cases, but also made himself just a little bit better across the board. His head part has access to plus 100 to heat or cool, and plus 200 to power. Now granted that with his head being a missile skill and an AoE, you definitely want to capitalize on that extra damage, especially to make use of and guarantee that every hit that lands, well, granted that missile always lands, but the damage that is spread load is made the most of and capitalized on. Now when it comes to heat and cool, you can honestly go either direction with these, as there really is no major drawback or disadvantage to using heat over cool or cool over heat. So honestly, this is one I would kind of leave to your personal preference in this case, depending on how you choose to want to use Chrotojil's head, if you choose to use it at all. Right arm has access to plus 200 to success, plus 300 to power, and a damage plus skill that will grant him an additional 30% damage if he is triggering pierce damage with his attack, which will absolutely come in handy when breaking parts very reliably. Now even though, like I mentioned earlier, his base damage isn't necessarily as high as most other conventional shooters, this is where he definitely comps that and kind of puts himself just a step above most others, despite it requiring him to actually break parts when using it. That being said, the damage plus and the extra bonus to power are the 2 skills you really want to capitalize on in this case. Success is nice to have, and if you do choose to go after it, it's completely up to you, as bonus to success means that he's going to have the lesser likelihood of either missing attacks or an even lower likelihood of not landing a critical hit. Left arm has access to plus 200 to success, much like his right arm, but a bonus to 200 to power instead, and a passive plus 200 to heat and cool each. Now, even though scattered AoEs typically have a higher success rate, you really don't want to mess with success or bother with it too much in that regard, since he's already doing pretty well in that department. Passive plus, however, with a plus 200 to heat and cool means that he's absolutely going to be zipping back and forth whenever he wants to take these scattered pot shots and pepper the enemy for someone else and for even the dedicated damage dealer in the team to come back and to come up behind him and finish the job just as easily. That being said, the passive plus and the plus 200 to power are both the two big ones you want to shoot for if you want to build up Chrotojil in this case. And his legs is definitely where he shines the most and capitalizes on his extra bonus in extra damage reduction in this case. Plus 150 to mobility is already right from start a very good place to begin, as his mobility by itself is, I'd say, kind of in that nice lower end spot of where bipeds typically are in about the 600s. So not the greatest there is, but this extra 150 to it is definitely going to come in handy. He does also have access to plus 300 to his melee resist, which is his lower stat on his legs. Nice to have, but not necessarily something you want to focus on too heavily compared to the other bonuses. But he does also have access to an improvement and an upgrade on Premacy, which means that when active, instead of getting a 20% damage reduction, he will instead be mitigating almost half of all incoming damage coming in from biped types, which will already put Chrotojil a major step above most other KBT types when it comes to conventional balance and survivability. And then last but not least, he does also have option to get an S rank on prairie terrains. And while that is definitely nice to have, much like any other bipedal type, he already is packing A rank on prairie anyway, so an extra 10% really isn't going to make or break him in this case. That being said, you absolutely want to capitalize on the Premacy bonus for the extra damage reduction, and the mobility in this case to even more so comp his slightly lower speed in this case to kind of bring him up to speed in some cases. Wrapping all this up, essentially, his original pure set and mixed parts scores, I had him at about a 7 across the board for his incredible balance and what he offered. However, if I take into account the new tune-up bonuses he has, I absolutely have to bump him up at least one step above, as a pure set score of about an 8 and a mixed parts score of about an 8.5, given that his already well-balanced and well-rounded kit already speaks for itself of how reliable he can be as a teammate, whether it be as pure set or mixed parts. But with the bonuses to his base power, or his heat and cool, or even with the case of his legs, an even higher damage reduction than he ever had before any other damage reduction, such as, say, guard boost, would come into effect or anything of the like, Chrotojil is absolutely someone you can rely on that can take a hit, keep on kicking, and very reliably serve as that second in command for anyone needing a shooter.